Hey guys, before we start this episode, I wanted to make a quick breaking news. I guess had this interview with Joshua Eckel, and he's coming up next. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg has passed at 87. It's a very crucial figure in my history as a human being. She's been a member of the Supreme Court for a long time, and a very influential one in both the actual court as well as in the country and world we live in, for that matter. So there's a lot that'll go into this, and there'll be a lot of talking about this very shortly and other things. This happened between the taping of the episode and the release that I'm working on right now. So, like I said, I just wanted to quick put that out there. Serious implications as far as if Trump gets the chance to put a new Supreme Court justice in before the election. If he does not and doesn't get elected, then I guess it doesn't matter. If he does not and Biden gets elected, it changes things. So if nothing else, it's going to be a major conversation point in the election, where it was already there a little bit, but now it is huge. So get ready. You're going to hear a whole lot about Trump's picks for who he would put in this position and who Biden would probably want to put in this position, and things of that sort. So again, in sad news, Ruth Bader Ginsburg has passed, and as much as we all kind of knew it was coming, it still sucks when it actually comes down to the reality of the situation. So thoughts and all for her family and her friends and people close to her, and really to all of us as Americans, because this is going to add another layer to the shit show that is our lives right now, at least politically speaking. So rest in peace and enjoy the show. All right, guys, it's a quick Friday interview. I've got Joshua Eckel. I hope I said it right. He is the chair of the state party of the Libertarians. We're going to talk to him about different candidates that are going on around the state and the region. See what the future is for Libertarian parties here in the state of Tennessee. As you guys all know, I tend to argue more as a Libertarian than any other party. And so I'm curious to find and speak with somebody who's more educated on Libertarianism than I am. So we'll get started. We'll do a short intro. And first of all, let me make sure I said it right. Eckel? Is that right?
It's actually Eckel, but
Eckel, okay.
I almost don't even hear it anymore because it's spelled Eckel.
Right.
So
understood. So, yeah. And Josh or Joshua, do you have a preference there?
No, Josh was fine.
All right. How old are you? We'll start there because you look like a kid.
I know I look young. I am 27 years old, so
that's
I'm getting up there.
You're a kid.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I'm pushing 40, whatever. That's fine. All right, we got the age requirements out of the way. You're old enough to be something, I guess. I don't know.
Understood.
So, like I said in the intro, like I often on the show talk in a more libertarian point of view. The further I get into it, the more different voices I'm hearing inside the party, at least. The more I'm not 100% sure I'm on board, but at least if I'm going to speak in generalities, the base principle of the party makes more sense to me as an individual than the two major parties. And so I guess the first thing I want to talk about is I had our county election commissioner in here, and we were talking about the rules and stuff on getting other parties on the ticket. What's going on state level with the Secretary of State and that kind of thing within the party, trying to get the actual Libertarian Party to be a recognized party throughout the state in general?
Yes. No, absolutely. Thank you for asking. This is probably our number one issue right now. So Tennessee is one of the few states in the country where the Libertarian Party doesn't have permanent ballot access, or at least partisan ballot access. And the reason this is because there's a law passed in the 60s that's set the threshold for partisan ballot access at 2.5% of the votes cast in the last gubernatorial race. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you compare it to other states, I think it's the fifth highest threshold in the entire country. So to put it in perspective, 25 signatures will get you on the ballot as a Democrat or Republican, and 56,082 signatures is what's required to get you on the ballot as a Libertarian in Tennessee.
And that would be specifically in a statewide election, or state or higher?
That's correct.
So
that's a statewide election, Senate, governor, or if you want to say Jo Jorgensen, or a presidential candidate. If we wanted her on the ballot as a Libertarian, it was 56,000 signatures.
Okay. Yeah, that is kind of strange. But See, this is where I
So
get.
there is a caveat, Seth. I mean, the reason they've gotten around with it for so long is they have an independent access where you can get on the ballot as an independent for 25 signatures,
Right.
and that's relatively low. It's the same as the Republicans and Democrats. But what it does is it fragments and marginalizes their opposition. So you can run an independent campaign all day long, but as soon as you try to form an opposition party, or try to get brand recognition for a group that may actually be able to face a legitimate challenge to the Democrats and Republicans, they put that massively high threshold there.
Right.
So that's one of the key issues. We have a bill that was going through the legislature last year, or I guess it was the beginning of this year before COVID. It almost feels like a completely different time now.
Yeah, the president got impeached this year.
Yeah, right, exactly. So much has happened in 2020. It's been a really wacky year. But so we've got a bill that's going to basically bring that down to a flat rate. And so I'm hoping that's going to be brought back up. The House seems to have solid support, at least the Tennessee House of Representatives does. The Senate is a bigger hurdle for us. But when I was elected and ran for office in 2019 to run for the seat, I was coming on the heels of 4 years of our activists grinding really hard to get these signatures. And I think they'd gotten 30 or 40,000 at one point before the window was closed on them. And so we're really focusing on a legislative solution to this.
Right.
And hopefully a litigative solution in the near future as well.
Right. So at least if memory serves, the presidential ballot is going to show Jorgensen as a libertarian, or is that still in flux?
No. That it's a big disappointment for us. Just like Gary Johnson in 2016, she'll be on the ballot as an independent again this year. Okay. Now, I think this may be the last cycle in which that's the case, because the newly elected chairman of the LNC has made it clear to us that Tennessee is a priority for the Libertarian National Committee in the next 4 years to try to, I think, there's a potential for a lawsuit if the funding's there, as well as just national support to try to help us resolve this problem so that, whoever is on the ballot in 2024 will actually have legitimate party recognition. But no, sadly, Joe Jorgensen and Kanye West will have the same designation on the ballot.
Did he actually pull a petition? Is he going to be on the ballot here?
Yeah, he will.
Good for him. That's hilarious.
Yep.
That's just good fun.
It's a pretty low threshold again with that independent access. So I think it's 250 signatures or so.
That's so funny.
Not too bad. 275. Yeah.
That's just.
But that's definitely the big issue, though. I mean, but a lot of people focus on ballot access for us, and I like to talk about it because it does show. It's a systematic barrier set up against our party.
Right. We were talking about.
We
were talking about debates and stuff too, and we looked up the
Commission on Presidential Debates.
Yeah, which is funded by the DNC and the RNC. It's like, oh, well, they're real hot to add anybody to the game. That makes sense. And there's some weird nonprofit designation, so they get to play all sorts of tax games too. And it's like, oh, okay. I mean, yeah, like it's very clearly, at least for me, because I pay attention, because again, I do listen to a lot of libertarian voices. Like, it's very clear to me that it is very well designed to keep this out.
Yeah, absolutely. But what should surprise you, Seth, and this is what I think is encouraging, is that in spite of these massive hurdles, in spite of the fact that we have to spend almost our entire war chest every year to get on the ballot, period, we are still experiencing electoral success. In 2018, for example, in Tennessee, we elected the county mayor of Trousdale County, dues-paying libertarian. We elected county commissioners across the state. We elected a city councilor out in Carthage. Going this year, in 2020, we're going to have 4 candidates on the ballot, all in local nonpartisan races. And these are very, fiscally conservative, community-oriented people that are dues-paying party members, but they're deciding that rather than, try to play these games and run for, these bigger seats, we're going to start small, build our foundation, get, our feet on the solid ground with some of these nonpartisan races, and then work to build from there. Right. And that's only Tennessee. That's, there are other states across the country where libertarians are having same kind of successes, if not better. Look at Rainwater is running for governor in Indiana right now. He's polling at 25%. He's within 5 to 10 points of the front runner in that race. So, we're experiencing success. It's fragmented. It takes different forms, but especially in nonpartisan races in Tennessee, we're winning. So we just got to keep that momentum.
Well, I think the principles are there. Like, I would argue in general that I'd say most people, if we could build a good checklist of what it means to be party A, B, or C, and did it in some fun little weird, like, nondescript format, so nobody knew which one was what as they're answering the questions.
Yeah,
I would say that more people than not would end up getting shoved, for lack of a better word, getting put in the libertarian box. I think
I agree with that.
most people generally don't care about their neighbors in the sense that they care what they're doing with their lives. They care about their neighbors in the sense that they're their neighbors and their friends, and they want them to be happy and healthy. But they don't care about them in the gay, straight, whatever.
Right.
They do this for a living. They do this in their downtime. I don't think most people care about most of those things on the whole. They care about how their government's spending their money. They care about how their government is teaching their kids. They care about how their government is policing their streets, and
Yeah.
that's about it. And so I would say on major issues, and that's I guess the genesis of my libertarianism, is that I think for the base core values of it makes more sense to me as normal people, because I don't really think the majority of Republicans are, I don't know, I'm trying to think of
Small
a specific,
government.
yeah, like they used to be.
I mean, I could give you a million of them.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Republican Party in the last 5 years has changed just so dramatically and gone populist. It's kind of scary in a way. But no, I couldn't agree more with what you just said, Seth. I mean, that's not only true on a national level, but it's even more true in East Tennessee, where you are. I mean, the East Tennessee, the people from East Tennessee are descendants of moonshiners. You know what I mean? And the
Right.
people out there in Knoxville and the surrounding area, they elected Glenn Jacobs as mayor. For goodness sake, and Glenn Jacobs is a lifetime member of the Libertarian Party of
Right, and yet
the National Libertarian Party.
for the political party that plays, he's acting as a Republican, which
Yeah, and
you know,
he's
and
in
he's
a
in a-
fight within his party all the time. So
right, and he's been
it's what it is.
he's been like I've been begging him to come on here, and I've talked to his staff a couple times trying to get him to come on here, because he's every week there's a new one, especially right now with this Board of Health and the mask mandates and the stuff they're doing to the bars and stuff like that right now.
Yeah.
And like I got in an argument with one of our listeners on our Facebook page about it, and because one of the things that I've kind of joked about, or not joked about, but I'm fairly serious about, is whether I think Knoxville should go metro or not. And so it's been a long running thing as I'm talking to different political figures on what their thoughts on it, because my feelings baseline is that it's an eventuality. And why are we waiting until it's a big fight to break the two units down, and instead of preparing for the future and trying to get some of the growing pains out of the way before we actually need it. And that's kind of my base premise on it. But we were arguing about this, the mask mandate and our Board of Health mandating, and basically our unelected bureaucrats making law, and Glenn Jacobs is wholly against it. And this is what confuses me about it. Not that you know the answers to this, but like, I'm confused about it. The only elected official on that board is Glenn Jacobs, who has always voted against it. He is by himself. Yeah. It's 7 or 8 to 1 every time they vote on something. And to me, it's like, okay, like we could talk about the ends or the means. There's an ends and a means happening right here. There's the ends is that we're taking a semi-educated approach on how to deal with and keep the public safe and try to keep the numbers down and all that kind of crap. That's the ends, and that's a good ends. We want people to not get sick and die. I agree.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, just because those are the ends we want, doesn't mean we should be okay with the means of an unelected body making laws for
destroying the economy.
Right. It's not even, I mean, forget destroy, just the principle of it. To me, that's my biggest issue. Take the actual effects out of the conversation, but the actual principle of a Board of Health, who I'm not even exactly sure how they get these jobs in the first place, being able to vote on actual physical laws that affect me on a day-to-day basis. And Todd Frohmeyer, who's the guy that I've been arguing with, and not arguing with, having the discussion with about it, is that he ran for Democrat in my county district. And it's like, dude, if you would have won that seat, in my opinion, that would be your job, because you were elected to govern this county.
That makes sense.
Not this Board of Health. And so, like, again, it's the ends are fine. I'm not particularly happy with the ends either, but that's not the point. If we could, just for conversation's sake, let's agree that we like the ends. The means are what's the problem to me, and that's what Glenn's been super, super actively angry about. He's like, he doesn't like the idea that this bureaucratic group is making laws, and that goes across the board. I'm in the vape and hemp industry, and we get all sorts of bullshit from the FDA and the CDC.
Absolutely.
And I don't remember electing any of them, and half of them are there from like the Bush or even the Clinton administration still, because they're so
Yeah.
deep. You can't completely turn over every one of these departments with every presidential change. And so it's like, well, I can blame Trump for it because it's technically under the executive branch, but realistically, these are life positions of lifetime bureaucrats that just keep doing the things that they do for the people that they do them for, which isn't necessarily you and me. And that's what's obnoxious and
It's usually
frustrating about
corporate
it.
interest.
Right.
It's usually corporate interests,
Absolutely.
or their cronies that are, the guy that got them into that position. I mean, there's a million different things that go into that. But I mean, I couldn't agree more with your statement there. And that's one of the things I think where libertarians shine. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Justin Amash, the libertarian congressman from Michigan, but this is his entire thing. He's the highest elected libertarian in the country. Serves in the federal House of Representatives, and his entire narrative is about process.
Right.
And I think this is where we have to start coming together. I mean, this is where, in a way, the process conversation, I think, can be a unifying bridge between the left and the right, especially on the bottom of the quadrant. Because when you really look at it, a lot of the problems that we have nowadays, they're almost made up. I mean, they're culture war tools that the people in power use to try to kind of keep you feeling like the other side is coming for your livelihood, or feel like the other side is coming to cause you harm. And in many cases, a lot of the things we fight over aren't policy at all. I mean, it's like, are you going to wear, are you going to kneel for the flag? You know what I mean? It's very
Right.
silly,
Yeah,
virtue
absolutely.
signaling type stuff. And so I think this speaks to an issue with the process, and in the sense that there is no real representation anymore in Congress. When you go, let's say, elect someone like a Justin Amash to Congress, the entire process is driven by the leadership of the major parties. It's driven by the executive branch, or the Speaker of the House, or the Senate Majority Leader. And these people, they come up with what their agenda is going to be. They meet behind closed doors. They make the plans, and then they tell the troops how they're going to respond to it.
Right.
And so what happens when you can't, as a citizen, get your representative to make an amendment to a bill, or even introduce a bill, or participate in the process of democracy, like a democratic republic, then you get these weird proxy wars, where you're fighting over stuff that doesn't matter because the stuff that does matter is locked down.
Right.
And so, I think that's by design, Seth, because that really keeps us fighting each other rather than focusing on the true enemies, which are these massive, these cronies that have been running the government for decades and making it worse and worse. So, no, I couldn't agree more. If you focus on the process, and I think if we start bringing the conversation back to the general public, is, the process is broken. The process is broken. We have to reassess what the Constitution, what it was meant to do, and try to get back to our roots. I think that would be a unifying force. And so I see the Libertarian Party is kind of filling that role. There's a long way to go.
Right.
But
My
that
thing,
conversation has to happen.
absolutely, because my thing on it is I think on a local level, I think more of a multi-party system than the two parties. I think the Libertarians have value on a local level, but I think on the national level is where the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian platform makes the most sense to me. And because the principle being, it's like, okay, state and local, you guys deal with your own shit, and we're here if you need us, instead of we're in your shit all the time. And that's that. I mean, that to me is that kind of the genesis of the show for us, is that, we'd sit and the main show with the four of us when we get together. This is conversations we have all the time when we're out at the bar or doing whatever we do. We're hanging out. We're having these conversations, and for years it's always been, well, I don't even know who the mayor is right now, or I don't even know who my county commissioner is right now, and stuff like that. And we'd always end up in an argument about how important local government is, but never know anything about it. And so we started pushing that, and that's how I reached out to you, because at least as of right now, you're still listed as the East Tennessee chair as well.
Okay. Gotta get that updated on the
website. And so,
the current, No. I was the East Tennessee chair for a long time. Brandon Hughes is the guy who just recently took it over. He's a great guy to know.
We'll have to.
It was very recent, though.
We'll have to get him on. I'd like to talk to him some more and see what's going on more locally with that part of things. But again, I don't again, just using this Board of Health thing, mask mandate stuff, for example. I actually truly appreciate kind of Trump's stance on how to deal with this. It's like, we're going to have stuff, we're going to get equipment, we're going to get supplies, we're going to make money appear, which I'm not necessarily okay with, but we're going to make money available to help you states deal with this. But you as a state deal with this We're here as backup. We're not here to do it for you. And
Yeah, well, I
now
could
how
agree
that
with that, but that wasn't the same approach that was taken in March, where there was some serious pressure on states from the the kind of the health advisors in the Trump administration that really did, I think, cause this national lockdown.
Right.
But you're right; he has taken a more localized approach to it, and I can agree with you.
But and he still,
sure.
and then at the same time, he still plays his little games where he's like, we need to get back in school, and then he starts, threatening federal funding on states if they don't do X, Y, or Z. Which that premise in general, I hate all the time. Whatever it is, doesn't have to be this particular one. I don't like because I'm hot on the school board here, and I'm trying to figure out more what's going on and how the school board works and stuff like that. And as of right now, I haven't figured out and haven't had anybody that knows any better educate me on how we are funded as a school system here. We have a number, but how much of that is local, how much of that is state, and how much of that is federal? Because to me, it matters who your boss is on how you act.
Yeah.
And if there's if a significant portion of that budget comes from federal and federal says, do this or we're taking your money away, well, you're going to do it. And so, to me, those kind of things are problems in the grand scheme of things as well, is that I want things to be more heated, more contested, more arguments, more television, radio time, all the stuff that we see Trump and Pelosi and McConnell and all them bitching about all the time on the news. I want that story to be my governor, my mayor. I want those to be the stories on the news all the time, not what's going on in D.C. And I think that's one of the most frustrating things to me the further I'm getting into this, because I've had let's see here. I don't know how much you followed the Gina Oster, Eddie Manis situation.
Yeah, I'm completely familiar with that race.
Yeah, and so I mean, I was talking to them, and Gina came on post the decision, and she was okay with it, and she was real polite, and she was trying to shine a light on a really messed up situation as far as how the party, and not just her party, the Democrats in Tennessee do it as well, but how the party sets up the primary system, and how argue however you want to about who Eddie Manis is and what party he should be affiliated with. That's not the point, but that there was a problem in this system, and she was trying to highlight that. And as I was talking to her, we got through that kind of part of it, and as it got later into it, she's like, she's like, we barely had any local media. Like, I interviewed her as many times as WBIR did.
Yeah, understood. Well, I don't know if you want to get in a conversation about the primary process in Tennessee, and I honestly haven't heard Gina's specific statements on what she would see as a remedy to the problem that she's described. I know that there's that whole SEC thing going on, but the primary system in Tennessee is very screwed up. It causes situations like the Eddie Manis, that whole falling, drama that happened.
The reality is
because it's completely open.
Right. The reality is that I didn't understand, and this is what I enjoyed about trying to track this whole thing and sitting listening to their SEC call for 2 hours. It was really rough.
Yep.
But the reality is that a primary is not supposed to be for John Q. Citizen. It's supposed to be for John Q. Republican or John Q. Democrat.
Bingo. Now, but what you don't know, and I don't know if Gina's, and you may actually know this, what a lot of people don't realize is that is completely correct, yes. But in the state of Tennessee, you as a taxpayer subsidize John Q. Republicans' entire primary process. You pay for it, and you also pay for John Q. Democrats.
Right.
You are paying for that process. You know who doesn't get funding for their primaries?
Anybody
Alternative
else?
parties, anyone else. Is the Democrats and the Republicans, they take the money from the taxpayer. So from my perspective, and this is what I would tell Gina or anyone that's frustrated about the way it's set up, is, as long as you're taking public money and you're forcing someone like me, for example, who doesn't identify with either one of the parties, to subsidize your private internal business of selecting your candidates, then you better keep it open, because I sure as hell am not going to subsidize or pay for a primary that is closed when I'm locked out and I'm not represented in that process.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I love the idea of closing the primaries, but only if that subsidy ends. If that subsidy continues, it is even more immoral than what it is now.
Right.
And it will cause even more problems.
Because
screwed up.
Chris Davis, the election commissioner that came in here and talked to him, it's like, the way he worded it is that we handled it for them.
Yeah.
We handle the process for them, and I didn't think about it in the funding side of that conversation. But I mean, that is an office that gets paid through tax money, if nothing else, that is spending time and
Yeah,
energy on something for a party and not for the people.
exactly. You want to have a really good laugh. This will make you chuckle. In 2017, the party, we did bring on one of our first pieces of legislation, I think it was HB 662, who was, I think Martin Daniels was a co-sponsor at the time, but it was Bud Halsey out of Johnson City who brought the legislation. And it was going to simply reduce the signature requirement from like 2.5% to, I think it was like 1.5%. It's been about 3 years. I can't remember all the details of the bill, but it just put it this way. It was going to reduce the signature total to close to like 10 or 15,000 signatures needed to get on the ballot. And the Election Commission and the Secretary of State's office responded to that bill after it had gotten, significant amount of House support with a fiscal note saying that because the primaries are subsidized and run by the state of Tennessee, it was going to cost the taxpayer several $1 million to put an L next to your name on the ballot instead of an I or instead of a D or instead of an R. And so not only, again, are you paying to subsidize your opposition party's primary, which should be completely private, but a party like us, according to state law, and the way that bill was written, we would have to take taxpayer money and participate in a taxpayer-subsidized primary process at a theoretical, which I think was exaggerated cost to the taxpayer. And so for that reason, they denied us ballot access reform, which is just a complete catch-22. I mean, again, if you look at our bylaws, the Libertarian Party of Tennessee, not only is it against our value set to take subsidy for our own internal processes, we do our nomination process by caucus, not by primary.
Right.
And so the state was saying not only is it going to cost us too much money, but you're going to have to take taxpayer money, and you're going to have a typical primary process, which is not compliant with your bylaws. So again, it's really crazy because it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. They won't reform the law because it costs them too much money, and it costs, and we're already paying money out of our own pocket to keep the laws that exist by subsidizing the opposition parties. So I think it's a completely screwed up situation right now. And I don't know what Gina Oster's next step is after this, but I do hope that whoever goes to the state house, even if that's Eddie, they support ballot access reform because we really, really need it in the state of Tennessee.
Yeah, and I did not know about that part of it. But even I want the open primary. I don't know. It's still weird because
I'm okay with keeping it too, as long as we're subsidizing. You better keep it open. I'll tell you what.
But it's technically a felony.
What do you mean by that? Voting in a
If it's one of those impossible to actually enact, but essentially, like if I guess you're obviously a card carrying libertarian. If you go in there and pick up a Republican ballot and somebody in there that knows better calls attention to it, there is a three-person committee that will review your situation on whether or not you should be allowed to pick up that Republican ballot. And if those three people agree that you shouldn't pick it up, it's technically a felony, which then you lose the ability to vote in the future from that.
Wow. Okay. So I've been doing this for years. Yeah, I've been doing this for years, Seth. That's the first I've heard of this. I would love to learn more about that because that's
go back and listen to I think it's
the interview.
Yeah, that's the Chris Davis, the election commissioner.
I will.
And and then there's something about like those three people. One of the three people has to be a Republican, one of the three people has to be a Democrat, and the third person can be either or. And so it's basically built that they're never, and it has to be, all three of them have to agree, which they might actually agree against the Libertarian. That would make sense. But it would have to be,
really
they would have to vote unanimously that you are not whatever party you say you are when you pick up the ballot. And then you have committed said crime. But there's nothing in it.
Wow.
Like there's no actual. It's like a Class E felony, but there's no punitive. There's no jail time or anything to it. It's just I think you just get the felony and you lose the ability to vote in the future.
That's completely screwed up. I will listen to that interview because
I might not be
that's very
doing it perfect justice, but that's the gist that I understood it from talking to Chris Davis about it. So yeah, it's again, it's we said this in the first 5 minutes. It's like the system is built against allowing it. And now again, a good point that was brought up by Jesse Mayshark. He runs the Compass Knox. It's a online newspaper here. Pretty good. They actually cover a lot of stuff that the major newspaper and news TV around here doesn't bother covering because it's not important, even though it really is.
Understood.
But he had an interesting point on it. He's like, this is one of those times, especially, I can't remember what he was referencing specifically at the time, but it's like this is like, maybe just paraphrasing it, this is one of those times where people talk about having third, fourth, fifth parties on ballot access, and his kind of pushback is there are plenty of countries or places that do, and tell me how well that's working.
I mean, it's working. It's a functional government. It's a functional democracy. Right now, we have a corporatist democracy, a corporatist system that pretends to be a democracy that never doesn't actually represent the people. I mean,
right.
Well, if you want to compare it to a lot of European countries, sure, those European countries baseline, they might be a lot more on the left than we are culturally in the United States.
But it's also the difference.
Their government does work. It does function. You know what I mean?
But there's a difference in a parliamentary system as well.
Absolutely.
Because
we are basically we're like a proto democracy in a way, because we're 100 years older than a lot of these European democracies.
Because what is it like? Israel's they've had an election like 7 times this year or something like that.
Yeah,
because
totally,
there's not, they've been trying to, but there's not been a big enough coalition to get Netanyahu out of his seat or whatever like that. And so Netanyahu, every time somebody gets excited, he's like, okay, let's do another election, and he wins because there's not a big enough coalition to bounce him or whatever.
Correct.
And so
correct.
That being a good reference for how it doesn't work, but that's also a different system. I mean, it's not.
No, I mean that actually does work in a way, because again, I'm of the opinion, and I think most people are, and most people don't realize this is the way the government's set up. I think you should have a majority you should have a majority mandate to govern. In the United States, that's not a common thing, because we operate in a voting system that's a plurality takes all, and so. You are correct in the sense that the way our Constitution is written and the way that our voting system works, wherever you have a plurality takes all system, you end up with fear-driven politics. You end up with 2 major parties that constantly are working to smear the other side, to make you so afraid of the possibility that they may get a plurality. It also discourages people from voting third party. It discourages people from voting independent, because if somebody only needs to get 34% of the vote in a 3-way race to win, then you've got, evil's candidate A taking over this country with a minority of votes, or, not a minority of votes, but definitely not a majority. I mean, a small chunk, like 30% of the population.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a huge problem.
And it's 30% of the voting population on top, which is not a good number either.
Not even, that's not even 30% of the actual population. It's even less. It's probably like 10% or less. So I don't know how familiar you are with what Maine has done as pertains to reform surrounding ranked choice voting, but, ranked choice voting, along with ballot access, we had 5 key issues our legislative committee came up with this year and said that these are the issues that we're going to talk about. So ballot access, which we've already covered, is one of them. But ranked choice voting is another one. And we'd love to see ranked choice voting legislation come to Tennessee, because we think that not only will it reduce negative campaigning, and it will reduce fear-based politics, but it would again kind of start working to fix our democracy. And then the reason I say this is because ranked choice voting. Are you familiar with it, Seth?
Yeah, a little bit.
You know how it works?
Yeah, that's how Joe Jorgensen wins the presidency if they were doing that federally right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, because it would be everybody that because if you're going 1, 2, 3, and if I'm a Trumper and I'm going 1, 2, 3, it's Trump, Jorgensen, Biden. If I'm a Biden, if I'm a leftist, I go Biden, Jorgensen, Trump. And most likely there's enough in the middle there that the math will come out that Jorgensen's the winner, even though she didn't have the majority of ones.
That's actually how it happened inside the internal LP primary. We had 10 candidates running, and we do ranked choice voting for our nomination. And Jorgensen never polled at first or second place. She was always kind of in the back. But when you were looking at polling, she was the delegates' second, almost all the delegates' second choice.
Right, because it was the judge. Amash and
Judge Tim Gray, and Justin Amash actually withdrew his campaign before.
Oh, did he?
He actually got to the vote. Yeah, he did not run for the nomination and lose it. He just kind of announced exploratory committee and then decided against it. But it was Jacob Hornberger, right. Judge Tim Gray, Joe Jorgensen. There was Adam Kokesh was in there as well. There were a couple other people. But yeah, I mean, she won. Mainly because she didn't piss anyone off. She had the nicest campaign. She didn't screw with any factions. But for the sake of your listeners, if you're not familiar with ranked choice voting, as Seth said, you basically rank your choices first, second, third, and then they do instant runoffs. And they, if let's say your third choice doesn't get, doesn't make it into a majority vote, they just take out the bottom candidate and they continue to take out the last candidate, the lowest performing candidate, until one candidate gets 51% or more. And so I think that's why it's so important, because Again, if you govern with 30% of the vote, you don't have a mandate, man.
Right.
If you can get 51% of the vote, you're getting buy-in. People are behind you, and I think it really would fix the way our politics works. Even if it was just presidential electors were chosen through ranked choice voting, or the actual candidates, and then the electors were given proportionally based on the way the ranked choice voting results turned out. I think that would really change a lot in politics. And right now, I think the only state that has done it is Maine. And even in Maine, the Republican Party sued hard to try to keep that from getting implemented. Thankfully, this will be the first election in which they're actually going to have real ranked choice.
Cool. I'll have to keep an eye on that.
Election.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I just think it goes into like we could pick an issue, but I mean the election process being one of the big issues on the table here. It's one of those that we can all agree it's broken. I don't think anybody's going to argue against that there's a problem. But depending on who you are and where you stand in the spectrum is how willing you are to make a solution, because for some people the problem is a good thing.
Yeah.
And so,
well, I mean, again, if you're using the dysfunction to stay in power and keep yourself wealthy and keep yourself powerful, then yeah, I mean, the establishment wants to protect that system. They don't want to reform that system.
Right.
And so it's got to come from the people. It's got to come from both people on the left or the right, realizing that the system's broken and calling for reform. I mean, it's the most boring thing in the world, really, when you start talking about voting reform, election reform, or ballot access reform. But when you really think about it, that process stuff is the most important thing that we could do to fix it, to save our democracy. And if we don't do it, we don't have a big movement around it, then we're going to keep sliding closer and closer to tyranny and closer, more and more into authoritarianism.
Right, because this pendulum is swinging harder and harder every election cycle. And
it's not losing momentum, that's for sure.
Right, it's going to break on one side or the other, and then we're going to have a big hole to dig out of once it fully breaks. All right, so that was 2 of the 5 legislative issues.
Yeah, you want to hear the other 3?
Sure, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So the other 3, we'll start with jury nullification. Are you familiar with jury nullification?
I mean, I understand the process as far as there could be, for reason A, B, or C, it can basically, the jury is not functional to do its job, and so it kind of fires it.
Well, not necessarily, actually. So fully informed jury legislation, this was brought into Tennessee a couple years ago. It's something that we strongly support. It basically requires a judge to inform a jury of their right to nullify a law. So you can vote to convict, you could vote to not convict, or you can vote to nullify the context of the law if you're a juror. Now, what you don't realize is that that's a constitutional power that you have that can't be taken away from you. But if you express to anyone in the courtroom that you plan to engage in jury nullification, you're often, if not most of the time, kicked off the jury. As soon as they catch a whiff of that, they try to remove you for obvious reasons. So, jury nullification is one of the most powerful tools that we have to fight unjust, immoral laws. And so, I think it was, again, Martin Daniels, one of the people's names you're going to hear a lot. He's one of the more libertarian members of the House of Representatives in Tennessee. I think he was associated with the last recent push to bring a bill to the legislature that would require a judge to inform a jury of the right to nullify, and then obviously make it easier for jurors to participate in nullification if they so decided to do so. It gives them the ability to, kind of enact their moral judgment to decide whether or not you want to put someone in jail. Like, again, if I was a juror and somebody brought me on a case where someone was caught smoking cannabis, I mean, most people would agree it's an immoral thing to lock someone up for a decade just because they decided to consume a plant and no harm to anyone else.
Right. So I, as the juror, I'm not arguing that he's not guilty. He's absolutely guilty of it.
Absolutely.
But it is not to the level that it should be a criminal. Right.
Yeah.
It's not the
exactly.
I'm not going to vote not guilty because that's a lie, but I'm not going to vote guilty because it's not something that should be put in jail for. I get it. Yeah.
Bingo. So that's jury nullification. That's a big thing that we support and we'll continue to support going forward, especially in the Tennessee legislature. There have been bills. I don't know for a fact whether there will be a bill next year. When we get closer to January, I think it'll become clear as to whether or not it's going to make its rounds again. But we've gotten behind that hardcore. The other items are civil asset forfeiture, and this is my big one. I'm not sure if you heard the story a couple years ago about that woman out of Sevierville who had her entire inheritance stolen because of antacid. Did you ever hear this story?
No,
this
not
is a woman in
specifically.
Tennessee. So there's a woman in Tennessee. This was late 2000s. She apparently had antacid pills that she had ground up for use for like, day-to-day consumption. She kept it in a little baggie in her dash. One day, her mother passed away and she got a massive inheritance. And so she was taking that money. It was cash, several tens of thousands of dollars she had in cash that she was driving to the bank to deposit. She got pulled over. The police brought up potential DUI situation. And they saw the anti-acid pills and they assumed they were drugs. So according to Tennessee law, if you are suspected, if you have large amounts of cash or assets that they suspect that you can use in a crime, the Tennessee law enforcement can seize those assets from you, and then you have to petition a court to get it back. The screwed up thing about this whole situation about this woman in Sevierville is she had her entire inheritance stolen by Tennessee law enforcement, and it was proven in court later that she wasn't under the influence of drugs, that it was anti-acid, not heroin. And then she had to go through an arduous years-long process, extremely expensive process, to petition the court to allow her to get her inheritance money back. So fundamentally broken, fundamentally corrupt. I mean, it's unconstitutional. It's a violation of the idea of innocent until proven guilty.
Right. She was never convicted of a DUI. She was never convicted of possession.
She was never convicted of possession, never convicted of a DUI, and
so
she
literally,
still had to go through a multi-year-long process.
You have cash and something that looks like drugs. They can take it, and it's regardless of
legal,
regardless of actual,
of
a crime actually taking place.
Yeah. So you do not have. They don't. And this is what's so screwed up about it is they don't have to prove anything. They can seize your assets.
Right, which again is absolutely backwards from the rules. The rules are that the state is the one obligated to prove it, not the defendant is not obligated to prove they didn't. The state's obligated to prove they did, except for on this one.
Yes, exactly. So the police unions love this stuff. I mean, it's really what's funding their ability to buy tanks and toys and all these big things that they used against the citizenry.
We need a local army.
Exactly. They build this local army by literal theft, Seth, and that's it's just one of those things that thinking about it just absolutely bugs me. I'll put someone on the spot here. My Representative Johnny Garrett, is a member of the Civil Justice Subcommittee in the Tennessee House of Representatives. Year over year, and this guy could be the deciding vote to end civil asset forfeiture in the state of Tennessee. Year over year, this man votes to protect it and protect it and protect it and protect it.
So what's devil's advocate? What's the argument? Like, what's the argument to keep it in place?
The argument, and I've spent a lot of time talking to these people, the argument is we need it to fight drug use, drug trafficking.
Okay, so we'll take our libertarian hats off for a second and pretend like the drug war is important. Just for fun, let's pretend like it's important. So stealing from non-criminal citizens who aren't drug dealers or drug users is their justification to fight actual drug dealers, and that doesn't make it. That argument doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I'm taking off my hat.
Okay,
Jeff, like you said.
Right, because I mean, you and I are both going to be anti-drug war anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I made my case on the libertarian side. What you're going to hear are going to be anecdotes like this. There's a truck going down I-40, and you've got a state trooper that pulls this truck over, and they pull the truck over, and it's full of $50,000 in cash that's going to El Paso, Texas, for a drug transaction. As a law enforcement officer, you need to have the ability to seize that money to ensure that transaction can't happen and to basically disrupt the supply chain.
So it's pre-crime, like that Minority Report.
Pre-crime.
Okay.
Pre-crime. But I mean, exactly. And they do it with like vehicles, which is what's screwed up. I mean, I wish I had the numbers in front of me, and I may be able to pull it up while we're on the phone. But when you look at the amount of money that was stolen, it's in the millions of dollars in Tennessee from
we had
a
fun one on our last hunting adventure, which I mean, I guess it could have fallen under the purview if they felt like it. We were out on our annual hunting trip, and we're in our RV. And go up to the Walmart we actually had a deer, and we took the deer to the processor and then stopped at Walmart for some beer and snacks, and we're heading back to camp and get pulled over. And apparently one of the things that state law enforcement's on the lookout for is campers, because they're usually not speeding or driving crazy, but apparently that's one of the kid moving the stolen kids. What's the word I'm looking for? I just blanked out.
Traffickers?
Human trafficking. They like to use campers because they're low key, and to have a handful of people in one's not that thing. And we're in there with like 20 guns, 4 people and like 20 guns, and he's talking to us about it.
Yeah.
And maybe our white privilege was showing because we didn't get in trouble, but
Yeah.
like under the guise of we could have been on our way to go steal kids from a preschool, they could have taken our camper and all of our guns and whatever else we had in the vehicle, and by the
Bingo.
rules, they could have kept
Yep.
it. Okay.
They could have kept it. They could have used it. For their own use. They could have sold it. Yeah,
we'd been in there for a couple of days. I don't think anybody wanted to be in there. It was pretty gross, but yeah, but the premise is there, and that's pretty gross.
Yeah, well, so just to go back to the initial thing, I mean, as it pertains to reform, there's a piece of legislation that's gone through this year's HB 340, and what that bill is trying to do is close the federal equitable sharing loophole, which it's kind of, we're getting into kind of political nerd stuff, but the federal equitable sharing loophole is basically a way for the local law enforcement in Tennessee to seize assets and then run it through a federal program so that there was really no oversight for Tennessee lawmakers and Tennessee legislation. So it's just a way for them to kind of launder money through the feds. Once they steal your money, they launder it through the feds, and then they kind of avoid Tennessee oversight. So, again, Martin Daniel, one of my favorite members of the House of Representatives, had this bill that was going to end that federal equitable sharing loophole. Americans for Prosperity and a couple other organizations have brought bills that are trying to do small bits of reform, but as a libertarian, I believe that it's fundamentally immoral and unconstitutional, and it needs to end as soon as possible. And you can thank people like Johnny Garrett, for example, on the Civil Justice Subcommittee, ensuring that it lives on year over year. But I think we're moving in the right direction in Tennessee. But we got to keep advocating for reform, man, because they're really screwed up.
That's
but
3.
So
moving on to number 4.
Yeah, so we got ballot access reform. We talked about ranked choice voting. We talked about civil asset forfeiture. Talked about fully informed jury. So that should be 4.
That's 4. On to number 5.
Yeah, I know you. Hey, Seth, I know you can guess the last one. I mean, I'm a libertarian after all. Cannabis decriminalization.
That's
the state of Tennessee.
That's such a half step to me, though. Like, I mean, obviously, and I think realistically, it's on the docket anyway, whether it's a libertarian push or not. I think the bigger. Yep. I think the bigger, broader, the one that libertarians get the most shit for is just let's go full out. Let's just get done. Let's decriminalize the whole debacle. Let's fully legalize those that are. I fuck all of it. I don't really care. Mean, like, it's one of those. If I get in an argument with somebody and they want to really, I really want to get them hot and heated. It's like heroin should be legal. Like, what? Sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, it would reduce deaths. It would increase the quality. It would make it easier for people it would be less likely to die in an overdose and make it easier for people to get access to treatment.
Right. And
all these things.
And 9 times out of 10, when a user is in legal trouble, it's not from use. It's from the need to fill the habit and a burglary or something like that, and then it's just an additional charge on the burglary or whatever anyway. So it's not like you're going to fix the person by throwing them in the box. If you keep out the actual criminal part that goes along on the side, like, I mean, forget the black market side of it too, just the actual user needing the fix and going and robbing a house. Well, they robbed a house, that's criminal, they go to jail. Cool.
Yeah.
But if they didn't have to go through the ridiculous process of obtaining said thing and the way they have to do it now and all that kind of shit, I don't think you would have as many of those issues with the substance. And I mean, yeah, people might die on it. That's fine. But I mean, it's not fine. It sucks, but it's fine. We are supposed to be free people. And I mean, I'm one of those, like, I think it was a Gary Johnson thing that he kind of ran, one of his little things that he used to talk about, which he wasn't the greatest, but he was better than, is the right to die, I think is the phrasing they always use.
Yeah,
I'm on board with that one. Like, if I get some stage 55 cancer or something like that, and I've got 6 months of horrible life in front of me with chemo and all the kind of shit, and I'm just like, you know what, I'm good. Or it's the right to try too. Or, hey, there's this new thing that we haven't gone through the whole process, because personally, I don't think the process is necessarily in my best interest anyway. Yeah, sure, doc, let's try it. I mean, I agree that it needs to be informed. It needs to be well documented, as far as, I, as patient, am more than on board with trying this experimental thing, and I will assume the risk that goes along with that. But it's my life, it's my body, and if trying to treat something that's going to kill me kills me in the process, I'll take my chances. I don't need the state to tell me what options I actually have. If somebody's out there got something that might work, that's up to me. It's not up to you. It's not
Yep.
up to the state. That's not, I mean, it's me and my family's conversation to have. It doesn't have anything to do with Nashville or DC or even the downtown city county building or any of those. That's that.
Right.
And I think that's one of those things that like just the thought, like the premise and the thought process and the principle behind that idea of the state thinks they have the right to tell you how to deal with your own body goes into so many other issues as far as the healthcare broken system. Yeah, it's mind but that one.
Screwed up.
I mean, yeah, because this is one where I've tried to get one of the guys on the shows. He's a top level RN here in town, and so he's our kind of our medical advisor on the show. And I mean, obviously, he doesn't know the finances other than what he makes doing the job, but like that one to me, like I'm trying to figure out how to get to the bottom of trying to figure out how to do a better job in the healthcare system. Because universal doesn't make sense. Because one of the other guys is a Marine, and he talks about how terrible the VA is, and it's like, oh well, if you want the government to run the healthcare, go hang out in the VA for a couple hours and talk to those guys.
You would hate it. Yeah,
None of them
absolutely.
like it, and so I don't know. It's one of those. I don't necessarily know the solution, but
Well, there's a couple. Yeah, that's a whole nother topic. But yeah, I mean, there's a variety of things you could do. I think that would improve healthcare in the United States, make it more free market. But no matter what your prescription is, it's, and no pun intended, is you've got to move it towards a more free market competitive
just
based
own
approach.
the pun. Throw the pun out and own it. Don't apologize for it.
I know. I'll keep that in mind going forward. But yeah, you've got to move towards a free market approach. But I mean, going back to what kind of kicked off this, is drug decriminalization would have a very positive impact on healthcare. Again, it would make it easier for people to get help for addiction. Right. And again, man, I mean, we've spent $1.5 trillion in the last 50 years on the drug war. The drug addiction rate has not changed.
Right.
Why are we spending?
The drug of choice might have shifted around here and there, but yeah, the process did.
The addiction rate is still flat around like less than 2%. And that's the same that it was in the 70s when Nixon launched this whole debacle, this travesty that is the drug war. So, I mean, drug usage has not changed, and drug usage likely won't change. I mean, it's one of those things about humans. We've used drugs since the beginning of our species, for God's sakes. Other species use drugs.
Right.
You want to mitigate the harmful effects of it. That's the goal.
There's that great video.
Not lock people up.
What's it like? It's like a tiger or something that's on ayahuasca. That's a pretty funny video.
Oh man, have you heard about this is another great anecdote. Have you heard about the dolphins that get high with the chemical, the pufferfish extract?
Yes.
If you haven't, you need to watch this.
I haven't seen a video on it, but I've heard the story about it. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll toss around these pufferfish that excrete this neurotoxin that apparently gives them a psychoactive experience, and they'll play around with this. I mean, they do drugs in the ocean. So I mean, again, you're not going to get rid of the drug element. What you want to do is you want to reduce the negative effects of addiction. You want to reduce addiction,
right?
Because addiction is symbolic of usually a bigger societal problem,
right? And right,
poverty,
it's
all that other stuff.
Right, make it a life that you don't want to escape from.
Exactly.
Help people
core problems.
Right. Help people achieve a life that they don't want to deal with, and then some of these things go away on their own without throwing them in jail. That doesn't fix anything anyway.
Right. And so, but that's why we made the distinction. Just to real quick recap this issue, we talk about decriminalization in Tennessee because I don't know. I personally am pretty pessimistic. I think that the federal government's probably going to legalize it before the state legislature gets off their ass and does something about this.
Probably.
So, I think that a localized, maybe even there was a bill last year that went through that would allow counties to locally decriminalize through referendum.
Right. We had it on an election not that long ago here, and it was one of those. And again, this is people that don't understand the system, and that was me when it was happening. Like we had it on the ballot here. It might have been city. I don't remember if it was city or county. Anyway, it was
wait. You were the one that was collecting the signatures for referendum?
No. We as in my jurisdiction or my locality, not me personally. No.
Yeah.
But one of the things that people don't understand about how the system works is that we could have done it and it could have passed, but it wouldn't have made it, and it wouldn't have made it. So it would have just made it.
Let's look at Nashville. They actually did decriminalize it, and the state legislature said, "Nope, we're not letting that happen," and they reversed it. So I mean,
and again,
that's a Republican supermajority that said that, Seth. I mean, they talk about they love small government, but then when it comes to local governments doing things that they don't like, they want to have the biggest stick and decide how these local communities should govern themselves. That's not libertarian. That's authoritarian.
Right. No, I'm agreeing with you there. I was just saying, like, there's that fine line of like I would say that the citizenry of Nashville trying to function in that in that passage, knowing that it's still state illegal, same way Colorado kind of acts now. It's like it's still federally legal, but they're okay with it in the state. And since there's no, and it gets harder on the local level, and I get that.
And in a way, you're right, because law enforcement in Nashville is not really even prosecuting people for low-level marijuana crimes, but at least the rule was overruled by the state.
Right.
So they still can. They still can legally, but they don't.
But
which is a good thing, I think.
Right. But if you're driving through Nashville on the interstate and the highway patrol pulls you over, even though you're in Davidson County, you're still subject to state law because
now, exactly.
Right.
But if you get pulled over by Davidson County police, you're less likely to have a problem. If you get pulled over by a state trooper, you could bet your ass he's going to probably
charge you for that. Exactly.
So, yeah.
Right.
That's localization, man. It's messy. I mean, that's a good thing, I think.
Right.
I don't have a problem with that. I'd rather, again, government closer to home.
Right. And that's right. That's my stance too, is that what is the state trooper doing in the middle of Nashville? What does he need to be doing there?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the point of that? I mean, I this is one of those things that I've been struggling with trying to figure out. Like one of the core questions that we ask all the time and nobody has a good answer. We've had one good answer so far, is name a government body that does a good job efficiently.
I would say that closest to home governs the best. And so I would point, I'm not saying, again, no system's perfect, but we don't want a system like, say, China or North Korea, where it's completely centrally controlled so that they make the optimal, efficient decision. Inefficiency, incompetence, mismanagement is going to happen when you have a fragmented system full of checks and balances that takes forever to accomplish anything, because accomplishing something without consensus is pretty damn harmful. So I'd say, I mean, again, the state of Tennessee, I will criticize a lot of things about the state of Tennessee. Obviously, as I've talked about, their voting system set up to protect the establishment. They abuse law enforcement, not only to steal from Tennesseans, but to punish protesters. You look at the bill they passed a couple months ago. But Tennessee, fiscally speaking, it made some good decisions.
Yeah, I mean,
and fiscally speaking, we actually are setting up a good future for our children. We are not in a budget deficit. We have low taxes. We're a very consumption tax driven state, which I think is good because it's more voluntary than a income tax, for example.
Right. And it also gets income from visitors, and we are a well visited state. So that's correct. So that those Ohioans and Michiganders that come swinging through here on their way to Florida or whatever spend some money here, and we get to take that and keep it.
That's right. They're not paying income taxes, I'll tell you what. So, that is a good thing. But I mean, it's all a microcosm. Like, I mean, we can look at one or two things the state's done that's good. But I mean, when you have a fragmented system like this, especially one that's decentralized and messy, you're going to have inefficiencies. I don't think, I could point to any perfect government. Right.
The best we've come up with so far is
there's no such thing.
TWRA is the one that we've come up with so far that we like.
Wait, what is?
TWRA. But that's because we're all hunters. And that's it.
Oh, TWRA, gotcha.
Yeah. And I mean, really what it comes down to on that one too is I can't remember the name of the law. This was back in the 90s. I think it went into effect, and it was hunting groups. I don't know if it was, I don't know if the local NRA chapter was part of it or not, but it was hunters went out and said, hey, levy a tax on our products and spend that money on preservation, resource management, making sure we have good places to hunt in the future. And they do a good job with it. They really do. As far as making sure that the animals are out there that we get to go and play with, and that the officers that are out there, they're fun. They come and they'll hang out and they'll be like, how's it going? Yeah. I got some stories from some guys. There's some good action over there. And they are guys with badges that are fun to talk to.
That's a very rare thing.
Right.
I like it.
Yeah. And so they're a good set, but that's one of those things. It's just one of those conversations. And I wholeheartedly agree. It's that the broader you go in the U.S. system, the harder it is to find one. Like,
absolutely. The farther away you go from local. I mean, again, you talk about federal, like land management groups, which would be, the name's escaping me, but whatever the federal equivalent to the TWRA would be, I guarantee you they're not nearly as well run as a local state-run agency.
The Park Service or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, the National Park Service, right? Yeah, would probably be the equivalent. We literally had almost a civil war breakout with the National Park Service beef with the whole Bundy situation, if I remember correctly. That's a couple of years ago. So the local is better. As close to home as you can govern, the better. That's my opinion, and I think that's the opinion of most people.
I think there's more places to make effective change for you and I, the local constituent, than it is, because I can pitch a fit all I want to Burchett. But at the end of the day, even if I get what I want out of Burchett, it's not going to make a big difference in my day to day. Where I can get.
And you know, one thing that Burchett doesn't say to you is that he has no power. He cannot control the direction of Congress. He can't even introduce an amendment or a bill if he wanted to. He is so controlled by his party. He has no power. He is just there as kind of a showcase to make you feel represented.
He's one of those seat fillers at the Oscars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so Burchett has no power, and you know, he might want you to think he does, but he's extremely weak and extremely ineffective, and that's kind of due to no fault of his own. It's just the system that he was elected into.
Right.
He sure as hell isn't fighting against it, I don't think. I think it's benefiting him, so he's going to prop up that status quo as long as he can. But, you know, there's really only a few people left in Congress that I look for those people like Justin Amash or Thomas Massey that are willing to stand up against their party. Those are the only ones that are kind of raging against the dying of the light, so to speak.
Right. What's his name in Utah? He's been kind of fun.
Mike Lee, yeah.
No, it's Utah, right? Fuck. He ran for president a couple times back.
Evan McMahon?
No, he's a bigger name than that.
He ran for president.
He's the only Republican that voted to
Mitt Romney.
Yeah,
Mitt Romney.
He's been fun as far as pushing back. Which I mean, again, going way back in conversation, that's one of the things I mean, I liked about Eddie Menace is the party doesn't like him, so he's probably got doing something.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's
I couldn't agree more.
To me, and then it's a totally inarticulate reason to favor a candidate, but I mean, if the party sees an issue with him, then it's probably a good thing.
Well said, Seth. You know, look no further than somebody like the Queen herself, Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, she is probably the only anti-establishment Democrat currently elected to office, I think.
Right.
And you could tell by how much the party hates her.
Right.
And you know, if the Democrats would have put Tulsi Gabbard in as their nominee, you know, this election would have been in the bag for them.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been so easy.
But
so
she's not.
It really would have.
She doesn't do the job in their opinion correctly, so they couldn't let her do it. I miss the same thing.
No, they wanted Kamala. They wanted Kamala to be the nominee, and then when Kamala didn't make it because Tulsi destroyed her, they chose somebody who's probably going to die in 2 years, and then they made Kamala VP.
Anyway,
so
yeah.
Trust me, by this, you're going to have Kamala Harris running for re-election in 2024 if they win this year. It ain't going to be Joe Biden. By then, he's going to be in his mid-80s.
Yeah,
he's not going to be around anymore.
Yeah, I mean, if he survives the term, we'll be excited.
Yeah, if he survives the term, I mean, unless he pulls a Reagan and starts getting, I think he already has dementia right now, just based on his kind of behavior and the way he speaks, and he just seems to be very incoherent comparing him to 10 years ago. But
right.
Yeah, assuming he can make it through his term, which I don't think will happen, you're going to have Kamala V Republican theoretically if the Democrats win next cycle, which I think screwed up. Kamala is basically like Hillary Clinton 2.0, but that's a whole other conversation.
Well, I don't know. I mean, like what'll be more interesting is if Trump wins, who the Republicans put up next time.
If Trump wins, the Republican Party is so screwed, man. I mean, I don't have a horse in this race. I'm voting for Joe Jorgensen 100%. But you know, the populism. You know, I do kind of deep down. This is between me and you and the listeners. But you know, I think that this right-wing nationalist populism really needs a rebuke this cycle. If it doesn't get a rebuke this cycle, we're going to have populist party against populist party for forever. And it's a horrifying prospect to me. So, I mean, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, horrible choices. They're both have basically created the system we exist today. Kamala Harris has arrested thousands of people for nonviolent crimes and then laughs about smoking weed on a podcast. Like, she's a epitome of a hypocrite. And Joe Biden is, basically wrote the Patriot Act, for God's sakes. That guy is not worth being around politics at all.
Right.
But this weird strain of nationalistic right-wing this Trumpian thing that's taken over the Republican Party also is a very dangerous because it's extremely authoritarian. The deploying troops to states that don't want us there, federal troops occupying independent states. You know, there are a lot of these things. The checks and balances are breaking down, man.
Right.
It's very concerning.
But one of the things that
see what would happen to the Republican
touch on
Party.
that thing just for a second though, it's like one of those things to me that's weird. Is it's like, you know, you're a citizen of what? I'm a citizen of Portland. Okay, I'm a citizen of Oregon. I'm a citizen of the United States. And you know, as far as how the powers are supposed to work is my city, then my state, and then my federal government is here to protect me. Well, if my city and my state are failing, what's supposed to happen?
Well,
if let's say I own a business downtown Seattle. Let's switch it over to the Chaz situation, just so it's a little easier to illustrate what I'm trying to get at. Is like I own a business downtown Seattle, right? And the Chaz zone comes in and barricades off and makes their own little unified whatever bullshit that they put together there. And I'm calling the police, and the police aren't coming. I'm calling the state, and the state's not coming. What is my next move as a citizen to protect myself, my business, my property?
To move and leave that horrible, wretched state. Because again, the federal government, the founders never envisioned the federal government having a standing police presence for like occupation of national land. That was actually something that's the reason why they created a civilian-based police force, is because they didn't want the federal government having a paramilitary force that they could be used for political reasons or be used.
Right. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying, like, realistically, though, like, I think that whole, I understand what your point is. I think that a lot of that nowadays is it's been very propagandized, because the community, the mayor, the local authorities, those are the people, as we've established, are the closest to their constituents. So they are there to represent the constituents. If those people who are elected to represent the constituents locally say to the federal government, we don't want you here, there is no constitutional precedent for the federal government to say, no, we're going to override the will of the local authorities and we're going to occupy this state. Right.
That is, that's never, I mean, there was a constitutional law professor that commented on this. I can't remember his name. I have to send it to you after the fact. He said that what happened in Portland a couple of months ago was completely, astonishingly, it would have been, I'm trying to think of the correct for, I'm blanking right now. It was astonishingly unique outside of the context of the Civil War. It had never happened before, with the exception of the Civil War in the 1800s. Right. So I don't want to get back to that reality. I want localization as much as possible. And that's just one situation, though. I mean, that's a small piece of the authoritarianism that's growing in the federal government.
I'm tracking 100% on that. All right, so final one is shit. I had a really good question and I lost it.
No problem. If we stop talking about it, it'll come to you, I'm sure.
Right, about 20 minutes while I'm in the middle of breaking this down to post it is when it'll come to me.
Yeah.
Shit, I don't know. I ran out. I had a good one, but I lost it. So.
Well, I can fill some air at the minimum, because there's some stuff I'd like to tell your listeners about. If you're wanting to wrap this up, that is, Seth.
Yeah. Apparently, sadly, my kids like food, so I got to make them food.
Hey, no, do your thing. So to your listeners, I tell you, if you guys are curious about libertarianism or the Libertarian Party, check out lptn.org. That's our website. We also are on social media. You can look us up, the Libertarian Party of Tennessee. We're on Twitter at lptn1776. We're always looking for people to run for local nonpartisan offices. And as you are aware, we have that legislative agenda, those 5-point bullets that we discussed. We're going to be driving home for the next, for as long as we can in the near future. We're going to revise it a bit next year. But again, check out the website. Love to have you involved. Things are not going to change. We keep making the same left foot, red, blue. We keep voting red and blue. Got to try something different. So that's where I'm at too. I think more voices are better. I think we need more. We need more options. We need more. It's not more divisiveness. It's more parties at play, because we'll come to a better consensus for the majority as a result. I do like I like the rank chase one. I like these 5. I'm pretty on board with these 5 agenda items. I like them. Nice.
So nice. I mean, it's inside the principle. So I wouldn't figure I wouldn't. There's nothing,
Well, you know how it is with libertarians. You leave them unchecked, and they start finding things to fight about. So the way that we did this was, we thought, hey, let's get five issues that we can rally around this year, and these are the ones our committee, our legislative committee, had identified and our executive committee ratified. This was after a whole process of polling libertarians across the state on what issues were important to them. These were the ones that bubbled to the surface. So these are definitely the big ones. Now, I'm not running for re-election next year, so there will be a new chairman in probably February, but we're hopefully having our convention in Middle Tennessee. Details to be finalized within the next 60 days. And we're going to be electing a whole new board. and planning for the next 2-year term, 2021 to 2023. So it should be an interesting year. It'd be fun too, if you haven't ever been to a convention, Seth, to show up and kind of see how the bread is made.
Well, we'll see where the world is at that point. That's kind of what I was kind of reminding me where I was
if we
at.
Still have a country.
Well, I mean, I remember what I lost is that how much do you think half of what we're seeing on TV right now isn't happening if we don't have the pandemic on top? Like, how much of this is truly directly pandemic related?
Oh, when you say that, what do you mean? Like the economic crises,
like the economic crises, the protests and riots mostly. The action in the street part of this stuff right now is like, as far as this totalitarian issue coming from the executive branch, which I'm not disagreeing with. How much of that is the people on the street bored?
It's definitely unrest.
Right.
Yeah.
And how much of that
there was a vice or how much of the unrest is what, Seth? I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm just saying how much of the unrest really lays inside the pandemic more than just actual outrage with the way the system and stuff is working. Like, how much?
Don't get me.
How much of George Floyd is really about George Floyd, but it's really about I've got nothing else to do today, so I'm going to go break some shit. Yeah,
I think there's a combination of both. What happened to George Floyd was absolutely horrible, and the police in the United States are, participating in police brutality on a regular basis. The drug war is institutional racism. I mean, it was set up for racist reasons. But yeah, no, I do think that the pandemic and the response to it, everything being shut down, has definitely magnified the response. I mean, again, if you have nowhere to be, you're stuck in your house.
Right.
You're laid off from your job. It's a lot easier to go protest than it would be if you had something going on that you had to attend to. So I think that's definitely part of it. But America goes through cycles, man. I think there's another article I was reading on Vice the other day about how there's these 50-year cycles of violence that happen in our country. We had one in the 70s, and we're kind of experiencing another resurgence of that now. So I think it is, some of it's in natural ebbs and flows. Some of it's in, how society just functions. But the pandemic absolutely magnetized the scope and scale of this, for sure. And that's not to diminish the reason why those people are protesting.
Right.
The reason why I was protesting, there's still meritable reasons, but I think the scale was just shocking, mainly because of that. Yeah. There were a lot more people that were available to protest.
All right. So last question, your prediction for the October surprise.
The October surprise.
Yeah.
You're talking about Trump's October surprise?
I don't know whether it'll be a Trump or a Biden one, either way. There's something. I mean, we'll get there'll be something coming out the first week of October.
I hope that Epstein's involved in some way, and I hope that takes both of them down, because
there you go. Good.
Both Trump and Biden have shown some really bad behavior as it pertains to young women. I think they're both serial abusers.
Quality libertarian answer right there. A double surprise. I like it. It's not in Jorgensen's wheelhouse to be the executor of said dirt, but if it comes out anyway and we win on the other side, I'm not going to be mad at it.
We need a doctor for this country, and Jo Jorgensen is she is a PhD doctor, a therapist that can fix this country. So,
well, I mean, really, if you want to get in the silly partisan or identity politics part of it, it's like, hey, it's a lady, it's a real lady.
Yeah,
it's running for president.
She's the only female running. She could be the first female president if you go for her. That's right.
And
I love it.
And so much more. All right, Josh, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm going to do an outro, and I'll put some of the links to what you were talking about in the show notes. Any last words out there?
No. I appreciate you reaching out, Seth. It was great.
Cool. It was a good time. See, libertarians aren't all crazy. So that was Josh Akel. I fucked it up again. I'm sorry, buddy. The chair for the Libertarian Party in the state of Tennessee. You heard us talk about the 5 different legislative points they're working on, some of the different candidates they're going on around the area. If you're interested in any things, like I said, I'll put it in the show notes. We are almost in agreement @gmail.com. Look us up on Facebook, Twitter. We got a YouTube channel too. If we're not on a podcast provider you like, shoot me an email and I'll figure out how to get on there. Tell your friends about us. We're just trying to be more educated versions of ourselves, and through our education, we're trying to share that with you guys so that you can understand how this system is working around you. And once again, Josh, appreciate you very much for coming on, and we'll check with you later.
Thanks, sir.